So number one, the king of all first class flights, my background here, the residence. You can't beat it, the three-bedroom suite. And then my butler again escorted me to the gate. He asked if I wanted to be the first to board the plane or the last. And of course I said first because I want as much time on board as possible. I want to make sure I can get on, get some nice shots, videos, photos. And it felt so wrong being escorted. So there were three people escorting me to the gate. And it wasn't subtle at all. We just walked right in front of everyone. And so people are staring at me, looking at me. And of course, I always wear a snapback hat when I travel. And people are looking at me like, who's this chump flying in first class with a backwards hat on? Anyways, it felt so wrong, but just going in front of everyone, walking right onto the plane. And they gave me a couple minutes just to have the whole cabin all to myself. And that was a moment I'll never forget. They escorted me to the residence and they're like, just take a minute, look around, enjoy it.
Hey there, points people! You just heard a clip from Jordan Egbert from Counting Countries. Jordan has grown his YouTube audience to more than 131,000 subscribers, and he has visited more than 130 countries. His passion for aviation has led him to experience many top-tier first-class seats worldwide, largely funded through points and miles. In this episode, expect to hear about tips for booking aspirational first-class flights, Jordan's favorite first-class products amongst Etihad, Emirates, La Premiere, and others, why it might be a good idea to buy points for some flights, and so much more. If you want to book some of the flights that Jordan talks about in this episode, consider the Capital One Venture X Rewards credit card. Points from this credit card can be transferred to several of the airlines discussed in the episode. Remember, if you decide to apply for the Capital One Venture X Rewards credit card or any other card, never ever ever apply directly through Google. Always use a friend or creator's referral link. And if you are interested in supporting this show when you apply for your next card, check out geobreezetravel.com/cards. And if you're not sure what card is right for you, I offer free credit card consultations at geobreezetravel.com/consultations. And we have links to the Capital One Venture X Rewards credit card and the free consultation form for you in the show notes as well. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast, a show for anyone wanting to level up their travel hacking lifestyle. I'm your host, Julia Menez. I'm a travel hacker, coach, speaker, Filipino-American ENTJ who loves solid travel gear and using shortcuts on spreadsheets. On this show, I'm on a mission to bring you travel hackers from all walks of life to help you level up your travel hacking game. We dive into credit cards, miles, points, strategy, mindset, and the secrets behind how to travel the world for next to no cost. So, let's get hacking. Do you love to travel but hate the high cost of flights in cash or points? One of the most efficient ways to save on flights is to just outsource finding deals, saving yourself hours of search time. Thrifty Traveler is an email subscription service for exclusive flight deals at huge discounts. They will send you deals with average savings in the hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, straight to your inbox. For example, they've recently sent deals with flights to Norway for $592 instead of the usual $900 sticker price. There was a deal to fly round trip to New Zealand for less than 60,000 points with Delta, or you could jump on a flight to Bermuda for $399 instead of the usual $750. But these deals never last long. If you want to start saving hundreds of dollars per flight, sign up today at thriftytraveler.com and use the code GEO10. That's GEO10 to save $10 off of the annual subscription. Thank you to Thrifty Traveler for partnering with this episode of the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast. Hey Jordan, welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here and to talk about some of the most aspirational flight products that are very difficult to book. We are going to be talking about the Emirates Game Changer, Air France La Premiere, the Residence on Etihad, and a lot of other ones. And I'm sure people are already like How are you getting into these first class flight cabins? So we'll discuss all of that today. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you and how did you get into the game of points and become a content creator and what's your backstory?
Absolutely. So I've always had a love of travel. Growing up, my family didn't travel much. And so when we did go on vacations, I was like, it was a treat. And so I was like, this is something I want to do more and more. And when I met my wife, Chloe, she also had a similar love for travel. And the short story is when we met, I was working a job I hated. I was stuck in the 9 to 5, and I really wanted to find a way to just travel, but I didn't know how to do it. It was still in the early days of content creation, social media. So I was looking for jobs that would allow me to travel around the world. I found a job that was going to move us to Europe and live there, and right before we were supposed to move, that company went out of business. And it was such a huge disappointment. And I was like, okay, I need to take things into my own hands and not work for anyone else. I need to figure out how to make it work, how to make money and just travel. So we took a big risk. We sold everything we had. We saved up for about a year, all the money we could. My wife and I just started traveling, and we thought we'd try out content creation and see if we could build a social media audience, see if it was something we could sustain ourselves with. And we gave ourselves a year. We figured we had about enough money to travel for a year. Where points and miles comes into this is I also wanted to learn how to travel hack because I saw other people on social media flying in first class flights, staying in nice hotels, and they were just regular people. They weren't wealthy billionaires, right? Like everyone thought. So I did a lot of research. I did a lot of studying on how to book flights with miles and points. And it took 3 years of content creation before I actually started making any money from social media. But one of my first videos that ever took off, I don't know if you've ever watched Kara and Nate before, travel YouTubers. Nate posted a video from Emirates First Class, and it did really well on social media. He broke down how he booked that flight using miles and points. And so I had enough points on my credit cards. I booked the exact same flight, made a video from the experience. It did really well on social media. And that's really what jump started my journey as a content creator was that first Emirates first class flight I took. And it built me a little bit of a social media following. And so I doubled down on that. I was like, yep, this is what I want to do. This is what I love to do. And I kept making more videos from more flights.
That's amazing. For anybody who's like, okay, I want to take a similar path, how much would you recommend somebody budget for a year of travel? If someone's like, okay, I'm about ready to quit my job, but I should have some money saved up. How do you know when you're ready?
First and foremost, I never recommend anyone quit their job until they're already supplementing that income with something else. So, as far as a perfect number, I don't think there is a perfect number. It's different for everyone on depending on the type of travel you want to do. When I first started traveling, I was couch surfing. We were staying with people on their couches, like literally doing anything we could to travel. We had saved up about $50,000 that we had budgeted for 1 year of travel, and that was able to get 2 of us through a whole year of travel. But again, that was with traveling pretty cheaply and doing things as budget as possible. We could spend that really quickly or we could make it last longer.
Definitely depends on if you want to sleep on couches or in five-star hotel rooms and everything like that. So, as you started earning points and miles, did you start by supplementing your economy travels first, or how did you ramp up from sleeping on couches to doing Emirates first class?
Yeah, great question. So, for the Emirates first class flight, I was still at a point in my content creation journey where I was not making enough money from social media, and so that was a big stretch for me. I think I used pretty much all of the points I had on that one flight. The videos I made for Instagram and YouTube performed well, so I was able to make back a lot of money just from those 2 videos performing well, and then what I did is I took that money I made from the videos and bought more points and miles, signed up for more credit cards, and just kept booking more and more. Still to this day, I still fly economy most of the time, right? It's the big ones are still special treats for me. I still feel grateful every time I get a fly in a premium seat. But to make that first jump, it's something that I just wanted to save up for. I keep an eye on every time an airline has point sales. I'm always watching those. I'm always getting new credit cards. I have my keepers, but signing up, getting the sign up bonuses. And it's an experience that once you have once, it becomes addicting and you want to do it more and more. You're willing to do anything to make it happen again.
I like how you mentioned the strategy where you are buying points when they're on sale because a lot of people are like, no, I have to get everything completely free, which is not really how it works. Sometimes you're able to buy $2,000 worth of points and then flip it into $10,000 worth of travel. So, how are you approaching purchasing points? Because I also don't want to recommend to people, oh, just buy points whenever they're on sale if they're not constantly traveling and then they just sit there and then get devalued. How do you approach that?
Yeah, fantastic question because I hear the same thing a lot that you should never buy points, never buy points. And that it scared me for a long time because that was the conversation that was happening in this industry. People were so against buying points, and I could never figure that out because and I don't consider myself an expert on all the point redemption ratios. If I see a good deal, I'll book it. I know that someone like you and other people in this industry will are have it a lot more dialed in where you're getting the absolute best redemption rate every single time you fly. But yes, for me, I was doing simple math in my head where I realized, oh, well, I can buy enough points to take, for example, the Emirates Game Changer flight that I took. It was 80,000 points and from Dubai to Geneva or Brussels, one I can't remember. But it was 80,000 points. And I had an Emirates credit card. And so I got I think it was a 25% discount when buying Emirates points. And I want to say the to buy 80,000 points with that discount with a few thousand that I already had, I think it was like $1,500. There was no special promotion or anything going on. But in my head, I'm like, okay, I can pay $1,500 for one of the best first class flights in the world. Yeah, that's a no brainer as opposed to paying 9,000 or 8,000 whatever it is on the cash price. Someone like you is a much better resource for actually getting into the nitty-gritty of when to buy points and when to not. I just do simple calculations. I'm like, if I wanna take a flight and the point redemption and what I can buy the points at works for me and my budget, let's do it. There's nothing more to it than that.
I think the easy math is, okay, you wanna take this flight. How much does it cost to buy the flight? How much would it cost to buy the points to redeem the flight on points? And usually that second number is a lot lower. It could still be well over $1,000, which I think scares some people where they're like, what if I buy the points and then the redemption disappears right in front of my face? That's always a little bit of a concern. But if it's something like Emirates, they have tons of availability. It's just they're getting more and more expensive. So, for a lot of these other flights that you've taken, walk us through the experience and compare which flights you think are the best first class experiences. But also tell us, did you book these by purchasing points or how did you kind of do these? Let's talk about Singapore suites. How did you do that one?
Yes, Singapore is my second favorite, actually my third favorite. The number one, the king of all first class flights, my background here, the residence, you can't beat it, the three-bedroom suite. Number 2 is the Emirates Game Changer, and number 3 for me is Singapore Suites. Singapore was a fantastic redemption value for me, and it's one that I was super proud of when I found it. I flew from New Delhi to Singapore, and so it's not the longest flight. I think it's only about 6 hours actually, but the point redemption value was fantastic. It was 52,000 points for me in a first class suite. And in this industry, that is a wonderful price for what you get in the suite. From the book the cook, where you can actually pre-order your meal before you get on the flight. If you take the menu on the flight, there's still amazing options for food, but you have up to 24 hours before the flight, I believe, to do something called book the cook, where there's I want to say 30, 40, 50 different dishes you can choose from, all prepared by chefs that are fantastic. And so when I flew that, I pre-booked lobster thermidor, and it was amazing. To book that flight, I just looked at all of the routes that Singapore flew with the first class suite, and I found that the flights to India were really good point redemption ratio. So even though I had no other plans to go to India, I made a special trip to India just so I could fly that flight. And some people say that's crazy, but I'm enough of an aviation enthusiast, that was worth it for me, and getting to experience that was 100% worth it.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to find some of these really aspirational flight deals if you're willing to do some country hopping outside of the United States because I have flown Singapore Suites. It was from Frankfurt back to New York City, and they don't operate it out of there anymore with the A380. So I have clients who are like, I really want to fly Singapore Suites. What do I do? And the answer is get to Singapore, and you're either going to India or Hong Kong or Sydney, Australia, or one of those other routes that it currently operates because it's very expensive to get between Singapore and Europe in the suites. But if you're staying in the Asia Pacific region, that's where you're going to find more availability and it's going to be a lot more affordable, like 50 some thousand points for the suites.
And I've also found I've tried looking again multiple times for the Hong Kong and the Shanghai, China routes, and I've had a very tough time finding availability, and when it is available, it's always over 100,000 points just from what I found. I still see a lot of availability for Mumbai and New Delhi. So if anyone is like, "Hey, it's my dream to fly in a Singapore suite," look at those destinations because I continually find availability for those 2 spots specifically.
And I've also had the lobster thermidor, and it is fantastic. Highly recommend.
It really is.
All right, tell us about your number one favorite, best first class experience ever. How did you even get the residence? Because that's like 3 million points sometimes.
The Residence. Oh my gosh, I still dream about it daily. So, the Residence was the most I've ever paid for a flight. I paid cash for it, and it ended up being a lot cheaper than what it normally is. If you fly from London to Abu Dhabi or vice versa, just that singular route, when I was booking, it was around $9,000. Do you know if it's gone up since then, Julia?
Oh, I would just my vision would blur if I started seeing prices that are $9,000 or up for a flight. I'm
Yeah.
not doing it.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to be the second person to fly in the Residence when it reopened last year. Of course, I looked through every trick in the book to try and figure out a way to book it with points, and it just wasn't working. The math wasn't adding up. I didn't have the points, and it didn't make sense for me. But I had plans to be in Bangkok for another trip, and through my research, I had found that if you book from Bangkok to London with the stopover in Abu Dhabi, the residence could be quite a bit cheaper. So that's what I ended up doing, and I ended up paying $5,000 for the residence cash. And again, it was the most money I've ever shelled out for a flight. But this was last year, and I was now at a point creating content where I had run the numbers and I was confident that I would recoup that investment from posting a video on YouTube, from posting it on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. But still, paying that much money for any flight, it hurts, right? It's like, oh, do I really want to do this? Is it really worth it? So the first leg of that was from Bangkok to Abu Dhabi in business. The residence experience started the second I hit the ground in Abu Dhabi. I was able to pre book a transportation from the airport to anywhere in the United Arab Emirates for free as part of the ticket. And so that comes with your own driver, and they'll drop you off at your hotel. When you have the residence, they'll come back and pick you up at whatever time you tell them to. So I had about a 24-hour layover in Abu Dhabi in between flights. So to make the most of my residence experience, I asked them what the earliest was I could show up to the airport and be in the lounge before my flight. And they didn't know how to answer that. They're like, "Wait, what? You want to be here as early as possible?" And I'm like, "Yes, I wanna experience everything with this flight." And so I think they said I could show up 12 hours early, which is what I did. I showed up at the airport 12 hours before my flight. The first class lounge at Abu Dhabi, they've since created a new terminal at Abu Dhabi, but when I went, it was in the old terminal. The first class lounge is already a beautiful experience. Right when you walk in, it feels like you're in a five-star restaurant. There's waiters greeting you. You have a personal butler escorting you in. You have a view overlooking the airport runway, and it's just a marvelous experience. But when you fly the residence, you get your own private suite inside of the first class lounge. So I had one butler escorting me from check-in to the lounge. He passed me off to another butler. I think there were 5 people just for me, waiting to open doors, waiting to let me into the suite inside of the lounge, handing me menus, handing me drinks. So when you walk into the private area inside of the lounge, there's a little snack section set up where there's tea, there's snacks, and then there's a menu where you can literally order anything you want at any time you want. And of course, you have your personal butler too, who will come and check in on you every few minutes. And so, my butler, when I walked in, I just told him what I was doing. He saw my camera, I was filming for social media, and he told me, he's like, "You are gonna have a good time here." And then he said something that made me chuckle. He said, "I'm gonna make you fat." And I was like, "Okay, let's do it." And he took that challenge very seriously. I didn't even order. I just said, "You surprise me with whatever you want," and he kept bringing me food, everything from Wagyu burger sliders to pasta to Arabic meze, drinks free flowing, and it was just so over the top and so incredible. But there's also the the Etihad First Class Lounge is one of the only airport lounges in the world that has a gym inside of it. So I was able to work off some of those calories in the gym in between. Then after I took a quick nap before my flight, and then my butler again escorted me to the gate. He asked if I wanted to be the first to board the plane or the last. And of course I said first because I want as much time on board as possible. I want to make sure I can get on, get some nice shots, videos, photos. And it felt so wrong being escorted. So there were 3 people escorting me to the gate, and it wasn't subtle at all. We just walked right in front of everyone. And so people are staring at me, looking at me. And of course, I always wear a snapback hat when I travel. And people are looking at me like, who's this chump flying in first class with a backwards hat on? Anyways, it felt so wrong, but just going in front of everyone, walking right onto the plane. And they gave me a couple minutes just to have the whole cabin all to myself. And that was a moment I'll never forget. They escorted me to the residence and they're like, just take a minute, look around, enjoy it. And it was just wonderful. So you walk into the residence and it's a 3-room suite. Right when you walk in is this living room. You can see in my screen here, there's 2 seats next to each other. So 2 people can fly in the residence. And then across from you in this little footrest, there's actually a hidden mini fridge stocked with drinks. You can open that up and they'll stock it with whatever drinks you want. And then you have your own private bathroom, which it's the only flight, right, with your own bathroom. So you can shower in there. They give you a time limit. I think it's 5 minutes, similar to the Emirates A380. They give you 5 minutes of hot water. They give you pajamas and a robe to wear, and then you have your own private bedroom as well. And the thing that really surprised me is how comfortable the bed was. I think there were 6 pillows on the bed. Even like the Singapore Suites bed, we rave about it, we talk about how amazing the experience is, but it's not that comfortable, right? Like, it's a cushion. This bed in the residence felt like an actual hotel bed, and when I first got on, I laid down for a minute, and even though my flight left at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was like, "I'm not sleeping. I'm gonna enjoy every minute of this." And again, I was already full from all the food in the lounge, but it's another order what you want whenever you want and unlimited food, unlimited drinks. So I had caviar, I had steak frites, I had lobster rolls, and just a marvelous experience all around. Definitely worth the money.
So you said it would have been $9,000 to fly from Abu Dhabi to London in the residence, but if you tack on the Bangkok leg, it was from Thailand to Abu Dhabi in Etihad business class or regular first or economy? What was that first leg?
The first leg was in business.
Okay. So business class from Thailand to Abu Dhabi, then Abu Dhabi to London was in the residence. That was in total 5,000 or just the second leg was incremental 5,000?
Yeah, in total, 5,000. I think it was 5,200. If you're in London, it works if you book it from London to New Delhi, I believe. So London to Abu Dhabi in the residence, and then business onward to New Delhi. I had one of my friends, that's how he booked it and got that similar rate to me. I think it was a little bit more expensive. I wanna say he paid around $6,000. But yeah, it's interesting. If you just book the single leg, it comes out to 9 or 10, but a lot cheaper if you book from one of those cities.
That is a crazy good redemption, or not really redemption, just trick to get a lower priced flight, which I mean, 5,000 is still a lot. And I'm sure some people are like, oh, there's two of us traveling. I don't know if I want to spend $10,000 for two flights, but it's, I hear one of those once in a lifetime core memory experiences to fly in the residence.
Yeah, and again, it of course, it's a really big chunk of change, but it's a once in a lifetime experience that for me, I'll always remember, and for me, as for creating content, I was able to make that money back, but even if I didn't do it for the content creation reasons, even if I was just flying it, just to fly it, and I had that extra money, oh, absolutely worth it, especially when you think that it is typically double that price.
Let's talk about some of the other really aspirational flights that you've gotten to take in first class. You've flown Qatar first as well, right? Some people think that Q Suites, which is their business class, is like as good as it gets. But there is actually Qatar first class, which is even better than that. And it's pretty rare to ever find those flights. How did you book that and what route did you fly?
Yes. So they don't have many A380 routes left. You're right. It is hard to find that Qatar Airways first class booking. So that was the flight I actually took right before the residence. So I flew from the US, I flew from LA to Doha and then Doha to Bangkok. And so Doha to Bangkok was the A380 route. That redemption was 100, I want to say 140,000 points for the Q Suite leg to Doha and then the first class leg to Bangkok.
What is Qatar first class like versus Qatar Q suites? Because I think we've all seen a lot of content about Q suites. I've flown Q suites. I've flown domestic or like regional first between Qatar and Egypt, but it was much nicer than US domestic first class. But Q suites was actually, I would say, a bit nicer. What is real Qatar first class like?
So I will say Qatar Airways Q Suites is my favorite business class. Just the privacy you get, the service, the food, the lounge in Doha, fantastic. The first class experience is great, but it's not the jump you get from, say, Etihad Business to Etihad First or Emirates Business to Emirates First. The real treat of flying Qatar Airways first is that it's usually empty. There's usually not anyone else in the cabin. From what I've noticed, at least, I could be totally wrong on that. But when I flew, I was the only passenger in first class. And other people I've talked to have had a similar experience because it's being faded out. They're not using their A380s as much. The amount of detail and the amount of service I got when I flew in that first class flight was probably the best service I've had outside of the residence. The flight attendants were fantastic. The only drawback is there's no closing door like in the Q suite. So even in Qatar Airways first class, it's not as private of a seat as even the Q suite is. The seat's bigger, it's more comfortable. There's a different menu, so the food is better. They have cooked to your liking steaks. They have a lot of amazing drinks. But again, it was an amazing experience. There's an onboard lounge as well, bar and lounge on their A380s, which was fun to get that perspective. But as far as first class products go, I would much prefer Emirates, Etihad, Singapore over Qatar first.
How about Air France La Première, which I know a lot of people try to find it between the US and France. It's very, very difficult to book in points. How did you get that one?
It is very difficult. I tried many times to get it, and the route I ended up going is I just had to take a chance. So, I flew from Mexico City to Paris, and I booked on a flight that had all 4 seats of La Premiere still empty, with the hopes that I could just upgrade with cash at the airport or 24 hours before. And 3 of the seats ended up filling up at check-in before the flight. And so right at the 24-hour mark of check-in, I was on the website and there was one upgrade available for $1,200 from business to La Premiere. And so I took it, booked it, and again, that's another good chunk of money, $1,200 when you're already I don't remember how many points I spent for business, but I already shelled out a good number of points for business to upgrade to that. That again for me was one of those, I'm only gonna take this once. I wanna experience it, so I'm willing to pay that, but I wouldn't do it again because you're right, it's so hard to find, and it's so hard to book. There's so many requirements for it, which made it more intriguing to me as a content creator. I was like, I wanna do it so that I can be one of the few that has. Very enjoyable flight, nothing close to Emirates First Etihad, Singapore. The only sort of privacy you have is with the curtain, floor to ceiling curtain that covers you up, but when the cabin's full, you can feel it. It feels full, it doesn't feel super private. My favorite part of that flight was the food. They had very good French cuisine, and the other highlight for me was the La Première Lounge in Paris. That's one of the only flights where when you land in Paris, they will pick you up on the runway in one of their cars. So you have an escort that picks you up right when you land. You walk down the stairs right outside of the airport onto the runway, and you get into an Air France branded car, and then they drive you over to the lounge. You never have to go through customs, you never have to go through security, and you get to spend time in one of the most beautiful lounges. The thing that shocked me the most when I walked in I believe there were 12 different types of bottled water you could choose from right when you walked in. And I thought, wow, I'm not bougie enough for this place. There's a spa inside of the lounge as well, and they offer you a complimentary 30-minute facial and something else. And so I took advantage of that. I went into the spa and got a head massage, and I never had a facial before. That was my first facial, but it was great. Spent a lot of time eating. There's nice shower rooms in there. Yes, fantastic experience.
Any other first class cabins that you've experienced where you're just like, "Oh, also this one is really good," or actually a little bit overrated, and here's where it would rank amongst Singapore and Qatar and Emirates and Etihad and Air France that we've discussed so far?
Yeah, Lufthansa. I was not super impressed with Lufthansa. I was able to book it through United. It was a last minute flight for 115,000 United miles. I think it's pretty hard to find on United, but last minute they'll have some deals pop up similar to other airlines. The hard product I felt was outdated. It's not private at all. The people in the cabin you become friends with, whether you want to or not. And luckily I had an awesome cabin. We all were chatting and having a good time. It had been so hyped up for me, like Lufthansa first class. Everyone had talked so highly of it, and it wasn't my favorite. I obviously enjoyed the flight. It was amazing. And the icing on top of the cake, though, was the lounge in Frankfurt, which was fantastic. And when you go, they give you a rubber ducky. That's like their signature gift they give you. And I went around Christmas time, so they gave me a Christmas rubber ducky, and they have bathtubs. So there's sleeping rooms that you can take a nap in to recharge. And then there's also bathrooms with bathtubs. And so that was a fun experience to take a bath and have a little Lufthansa rubber ducky with me.
This is in the lounge, not on the plane, right?
This is in the lounge, but that'd be cool if there was a bathtub on the plane.
That'd be so much water if they had to refill it for each person. Oh my god. That'd be so much. These are amazing, like, once in a lifetime experiences. I haven't even flown most of these. I've done the Emirates A380 between Dubai and Egypt. I've done Singapore Suites and, like, Q Suites and a few other ones, but, yeah, some of these are still definitely on my bucket list as well. What's still on your bucket list? What else do you wanna fly going forward?
So I saw you flew Cathay Pacific recently, right?
I did. It was a sad, sad flight between Hong Kong and Hanoi. We booked business class just so that we could get into the business class lounge, but it turns out I have American Airlines Executive Platinum, so we got into the first class lounge anyway. But that flight had so many problems. The air conditioning wasn't working while we were just like grounded in Hong Kong, so it was so hot and it was an older plane. Once we landed in Vietnam, they couldn't connect it to ground power, so we just sat there in the dark for a while in Vietnam. It was probably the most hilarious facepalm fail of any flight that I've taken, and it was only 2 hours, so we didn't really have that much of experience for, like, food and drink and everything, but the over the Pacific Ocean Cathay Pacific business class or first class, that's on the list.
Yes, agreed. That's something I've been really wanting to try, especially to try that lounge in Hong Kong. It looks awesome. I'm also really anxious to try Japan Airlines' new A350 first class, New York and Dallas to Tokyo. I saw the points guy, Brian Kelly, he flew it on their I think on the inaugural, and it is massive. The seat almost reminds me of the resident seat here. It's so big, I think it turns into a like a double bed, like 2 people can sleep on it. So that's probably highest on my list. I've flown ANA's The Room, but I wanna try their first class as well. So those 2 are definitely up there for me.
Fantastic. Well, with everything you've learned about points and miles and getting to fly on these very, very difficult to book first class products, what would you say is your number one tip for everybody listening today if they want to recreate the same kind of experiences that you've had?
Yeah, be patient because it is hard, it is tough, it's a lot of work. So, when I describe these experiences, everyone's like, "Oh, it sounds so cool, you're so lucky," and I am, I truly feel grateful, I truly feel lucky to be able to do this, but the amount of work that went in behind the scenes, I mean, you should have seen me on my laptop just scratching my head, slapping my head, it's not working, and sometimes you just get lucky, and I've had a lot of flights that I've tried really hard to get and I just could never get, and that's normal, and that's okay. So, my biggest tip is to be patient and be flexible because there's a reason that these are hard to book. A lot of people wanna fly them, and there's not always a lot of availability. So, be flexible in where you fly from. I've had to change up my destinations quite a few times just to make flights work, but it's okay to get discouraged, it's okay to feel like this is the hardest thing in the world because when you actually find one that does work and it meets your points budget and it works out perfectly, it's just there's no other experience like it. So I understand. I've been there. It's if it's frustrating and you're like, ah, I can't make it work. Trust me. Yeah, I understand.
Fantastic advice. I know a lot of times we see things on the internet and we're like, it looks easy for them. It should be easy for me. It's usually not. That's fantastic advice. Speaking of fantastic advice, can you give a shout out to somebody else on the internet who you would recommend listeners follow for even more points and miles tips?
I really love the Daily Drop. That's Kara and Nate's program. Their email list is fantastic. They send out emails every single day with different travel hacks, different award availabilities, different things you can do to become a better travel hacker, and I've learned a lot from that. I really enjoy following the points guy, that account, Brian Kelly. I've learned a lot from watching them. They just shot a video from, oh, I think it was Wizz Air, where it's a mystery flight where you book the flight and you don't know where you're going until you're in the air, until you're about to land. And I think that sounds super fun. And I hadn't heard of that before, but I saw them make a video about that. So that's something I want to do now. Those would be my recommendations.
Perfect. And where can people find you online if they want to follow along with the adventures when I'm sure at some point you're going to fly ANA first class and JAL first class and all of those? Where do people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name on all social media accounts is Counting Countries, YouTube Counting Countries, Facebook and TikTok Counting Countries, Instagram Counting.countries.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Jordan, so much for joining us on the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast and sharing all of your fantastic experiences. I'm sure some people are so jealous right now, but hopefully, with points and miles, everybody can make it happen at some point in the future as well.
And tag me when you fly them. I want to see the adventure.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast. If any of the cards mentioned in today's episode piqued your interest, please check out the links in the show notes for more information on any of the cards. Also, if you apply for a card using the links on that page, I may receive a commission too, so please and thank you. P.S. I hear the links work better in Internet Explorer or Safari, and sometimes the credit card applications tend to glitch out in Chrome. Additionally, it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to this podcast, leave a 5-star review, and share it with a friend. And if you would like to make even more travel hacking friends, please sign up for the Patreon to access our monthly masterclass hangouts. We dive deep into a particular points program each month, and you'll get to ask all of your travel hacking questions and enjoy being around other people who enjoy points and miles just as much as you and I do. If you would like an invite to the next one, head over to geobreezetravel.com/hangouts to sign up to be on the invite list. Take care and happy travels!